On this week's episode, I'm joined by Alison Collis. Alison is a psychotherapist originally from the UK, and she really loves Portugal. We discuss, amongst other things, the psychology of moving abroad, the various aspects and emotions we experience when moving to Portugal, and why Alison misses her home away from home. Welcome back, or welcome to another episode of Portugal, The Simple Life. I'm really happy to be joined here by Alison Collis. Alison, hello, good morning, and thanks for joining us.
Hello, Dylan, and it's lovely to join you. Good to be here.
Do you want to just tell us where you are at the moment? This is a podcast about Portugal, but I know that you're sitting in the UK, and maybe you can just tell us where you are and a little bit about you.
Okay, so I'm sitting right in the middle of the UK in a city called Nottingham. It's a small city, and we live on the edge of it, but it's so far away from the coast. So since I've left Portugal, I have missed the ocean so much, and I feel really landlocked at the moment. So that's not great. I grew up by the coast as well, so this is quite hard to live in the centre of the country. But we deliberately came back here because it's in the middle of our circle of friends and family. So we've never lived here before. We wanted a bit of an adventure because we've definitely got the kind of being abroad bug. We were in Portugal for 8 years and we just loved it. And we've just had to come back for education reasons at the moment. So that's where we are. So I live with my husband and my youngest daughter, and our 2 Portuguese rescue dogs who are a star attraction. No one's seen anything quite like them before. So that's us.
Alison, tell us a little bit about your relationship with Portugal. You mentioned that you'd lived here for 8 years. How did that begin? What was why did you move initially to Portugal?
Okay, so I really had a lovely trip down memory lane this morning when I was thinking about this. So I first came to Portugal about 30 years ago, and
Wow.
It's such a different country then. You know, I think most of the motorways hadn't been built even.
No.
And I finished university, I came with my boyfriend, and we basically drove all the way up from the Algarve, all the way up to the Silver Coast in a really old, beaten up Mini. Really dangerous, actually. And I fell in love basically with Óbidos, and I can remember walking around the walls thinking, I want to live here. And I know people say that about holidays, but that's not had it happened anywhere else. So that's 30 years ago. Always been in my heart, kind of back for different holidays. And then my husband and I just really wanted to buy basically a holiday home. And so we bought our home on the Silver Coast about 14 years ago. And so we were just coming for our holidays, quite a few holidays. And then about 10 years ago, we just thought, why don't we? Because I have itchy feet. I just like to be on the move. I just said, look, why don't we go for a year, just see if we like it. The youngest girl was going to be in Jardim Infantil. She'd been in school. So she was up for that. And we just experimented. And honestly, after 6 months, we just thought, why would we go back? We just loved it. So
what were some of those things that grabbed you at the beginning? What were some of those things that made you, like you mentioned, you often come to a place and when you come on holiday, it's one thing. But I had the same experience on the Silver Coast as well, Óbidos as well, actually, where something about the place just made me think, hey, I could live here and I could be really happy here for a long time. What were the things that grabbed you and your husband and made you think that this could be a place to live and be happy?
Okay, so I think fundamentally it's the people. There is such a genuine kindness about the Portuguese that just shines through them. Because I think about the landscape, so I can remember being on the walls and thinking this is a beautiful landscape, but that would be true of France, of Italy, of Spain. And there's just something about the Portuguese that's embracing, and kind of quite very old-fashioned. You can be sure of them, really, I think. So I think it's mainly that. And then you add to that the cleanness of the air, you know, coming in off the Atlantic, the beauty of the ocean, and then and the food. I think the quality of just all of the natural food is, yeah, all of that makes a unique place, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what about for your daughter? I mean, what were those things for your daughter that you liked in terms of the lifestyle here?
I think I love the way all the children of different ages will be together. So there's no sort of segregation. The teenagers aren't feared and apart or scary, you know. So there's the kids, the integration with them, and the integration with the kids with the different age, you know, different generations in the family. So the kind of inclusion of grandma and granddad, that kind of extended family. I love that. And although we didn't have our extended family there, we felt that we were part of some of our Portuguese friends' families. And I think also before we left the UK, I had worked at a women's centre. So I'm a psychotherapist, and I worked with a lot of very troubled teenage girls. And I knew my daughter wasn't going to be in that same situation. I just wanted to take her away to a safer place. And primarily that's what Portugal felt like, a safe place to raise a child, basically.
It's a massive factor, the safety aspect, and you would think that being in a, you know, I'm from South Africa, so we set the bar really low in terms of safety. And when I compare sort of the UK and other European places to South Africa, it's much safer, the UK and Europe. But then Portugal, compared to, you know, the UK compared to other parts of Europe, is even safer than that. And you think, wow, it's just incredible. And I think we take that for granted here, I suppose. I think for me, I've never really forgotten it because of where I've come from.
Yeah.
And I do think it's something that Portuguese people, they tend to struggle to get their head around, living in an unsafe place. They don't understand what that means and what that feels like. As a parent, as an individual, because they've lived here for so long, and it is such a safe place. But it's a massive factor when you come here, and you are safe wherever you are. You can walk, you can be free at parks, at beaches, at all these things, and it's just an incredible feeling.
Absolutely, and I think particularly for children, but also as a woman, it feels a much safer place to be. It really, that sense of a predatory male presence doesn't come across at all. They're so respectful, Portuguese men. So definitely.
Yeah, and I mean, how much are you missing Portugal right now?
Oh, a lot, especially as we know we can't come. You know, we actually can't come at the moment. That makes it even worse. We're almost desperate to come back. Yeah, and I'm missing my friends, but I'm missing just being there, and so I feel quite sad, actually.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna ask you any more about what you're missing, but tell me a little bit, Alison. I mean, one of the things that came out in our the first time we spoke, and has come out now again. You integrated here. You know, you've got friends that are here. You became part of the community. How much did that mean to you? You know, you hear. The dream is always, let's move somewhere where it's sunny, and it's never that simple. And we're going to get into sort of all the little things involved in moving to another country.
Yeah.
But I mean, how much do you value that aspect of the Portuguese culture, that you were part of a community, you were accepted and welcomed, and were part of something, and that doesn't happen everywhere in the world?
No, I think it's the essential thing. Absolutely. And I think that's why it was so rich. So I think when you integrate, the experience is just magnified for you. You know, some of my most valuable things are crazy days out with, I have a particular Portuguese friend who would just, the beginning of the day would be, we're just going to Sintra. But it wouldn't be, we're just going to Sintra. You know, we'd be out all day. We'd have to go via this house to see these people, to pick up this, and then go there. And did we have time for this? And eventually you get home at sort of 2 o'clock in the morning, and I think, and my husband just looked at me and think, I thought you'd be back at 9, you know? So no, we had all of these unexpected things that we had to do. So you throw yourself into that, and it's delightful, because you meet all sorts of people along the way. You might never meet them again, but it doesn't matter. You've had that connection with them. Yeah. So for me, having Portuguese friends was vital, because they just show you, they let you into their life in a different way that if you just stay in your kind of expat bubble, you don't see. So I really value them, and just these, as I say, crazy days out, really. But I value the other expat friends that I had as well, because I think when we first arrived, we thought we were going to be really, really purist about it. We were just going to integrate with the Portuguese. And we did that for about 6 months. And that was hard, because you also need a group of people who really understand you more and understand the experience of, we're in a different country. We don't know how it works. We make lots of mistakes. We get frustrated. You know, how does it work here? And you need another group of people that go, oh, I get you. That's really hard. And you can just talk about other things, you know, or things that remind you of your culture, music that you like that the Portuguese haven't heard, or, you know, TV shows or whatever. So you kind of need a blend of both. Well, I think you do. And then it helps you be more adventurous. But you feel quite secure, and you can branch out. So we didn't come with that intention, and we came with an intention to integrate, but we didn't know how we were going to do that, really. Yeah.
Yeah, we never really know how it's going to look. I mean, I must say, when I came as a very narrow-minded, stubborn South African, I thought it was going to work out one way, and it becomes very clear within a matter of weeks that it's not working out the way you thought it was going to work out, and you need to adapt, you need to adjust, you need to go about things with a different mentality. And your part of your work, Alison, is helping people to acclimatize, is helping people adapt to different cultures. And one of the things that I wanted to jump into with this episode of the podcast is you know, the psychology and the principles and the ideas behind making a move. Because it is romanticized, you know, you've got Place in the Sun and these programs where, I'm going to go live in a beautiful villa with my vineyards and the sun shines. And we know that it's not always like that. We know that it's not always as easy, and there are challenges. But maybe you can start off by talking about some of the challenges that people can expect when they're moving to another country.
Okay, so a lot of these challenges are really predictable, and the number of people I've worked with, that they come in and they think, there's something wrong with me. I'm so miserable. I bought the dream and I'm not living the dream. And I just ask a few questions, and I tell them a few things, and they go, okay, so this is quite normal then. And I think it's that sense of, it's quite normal. There is an underlying psychological process that we're all going through when we move. Okay. And just sometimes knowing that is enough to make somebody go, okay, I know what to do now. All right. So I think the easiest way of describing it is, we talk about change and we talk about transition. So a change might be, you know, my partner and I have moved to Portugal. So we both describe that as the change. But the really important thing is that we've both got our own individual version of transition in that. So I have my version of transition, he has his. And how we adapt is so linked to our personality, to our beliefs. And often the key thing is, did I instigate the move, or did he? Did he really want to come? Did I think, I'll give it a go? Yeah, and that makes a massive difference to how we go through our transition. Yeah. So when Sorry,
go, keep going, it's okay.
Okay. So when we go through a transition, we basically, it's a U-shaped curve, and you can see it goes down in the middle, which is, we'll come back to that, but it begins with an ending. So we leave the place that we've been living, or the job that we've been doing, or both of those things often. We leave and go through this dip, which I'll come to, and we know where we want to get to. This is our new shiny life in the sun. This is what we're looking for. But we go through this dip, and we all do it. And some of us will go through it really quickly, and some, especially if we didn't really want to do it, will take a long time. And the longest that really takes usually is about a year. So with a lot of people, I say you need to give it a year, and you need to plan how you get through this dip.
Okay. Can I ask you a question just about the beginning of the dip, which I feel is quite important? I know, and I'll use a lot of my background because of the things. I think I was fortunate in the sense that I knew that it wasn't going to be easy. Mm-hmm. I knew that. I knew that it was a great opportunity, and that potentially I could have a wonderful life. And I think, although the end of the dip, the top of the dip of, okay, this is what I'm aspiring to, I think I was quite clear, and it was a number of things. And I suppose that's different from person to person. So the end of the dip, the end goal of what you want this to become is different depending on where you're at in your life. So I was a younger guy. I still was going to work. I was still going to build a career, these kind of things. The beginning of the dip, the beginning of the U, there needs to be a clean break, doesn't there? I mean, I made a clean break. I knew that I was going to give this a proper go. I wasn't going to have, I sold up. I left things. I cut ties. I sold my house. My dogs went to my aunt, these kind of things. And I really jumped into the move. How important is that? How important is that closure of, like you said, this is ending and now this is beginning? How important is that moment and that process?
Okay, so it's vital. All right, it's vital to say goodbye to where you have been. And so this is, if I can work with people early enough, that's what I encourage them to do. You have to have a good goodbye. Make peace with it, and then really focus on where you're going. So for a lot of people, it's really important to make that really, really sharp and crisp. Yeah, and do what you did, sell things, dogs going, cut ties. I think that's important especially if you're planning to live somewhere for a long time. So you really were I'm making my new life in Portugal. Yeah, because it forces all your action and energy forward. Yeah. For some people, and some people that I know in Portugal, they do have this kind of foot in both camps, but that's their goal. And so I think if that's what you're trying to achieve, and that's fine too, as long as nearly all of these things are made more helpful if we're conscious of it. It's like, actually, this is what I have decided to do. Yeah. But as you say, having a good goodbye is really important to be able to move on. And for children too. I know possibly a lot of the people that are coming at the moment are not coming with children, but if they are, those children have to say goodbye to their friends, to their favorite places, in order to focus on going forwards. Yeah.
Okay, so I mean, a practical thing, a good farewell party, and hey, this is it. We're doing this. Is important. Having people see you off at the airport, these kind of things. I know. I remember those little moments, and they were so important. I think for me, in terms of, I'm doing this now. This is not just play. This is actually, and that was really important.
Yeah, actually, something that's really interesting here, Dylan, is we often replay how we left home when we leave other places. So if you think back to how you left home, that can give you some sort of clue often, how are you likely to want to say goodbye. So some people kind of did have a big farewell, and some people will have snuck away. So that helps inform how you might naturally do it, and therefore what you might need to add to that to make it a more healthy goodbye.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. And okay, let's talk about so that's the beginning and the end, the end and the beginning. What are some of the parts now with the dip and what people expect at that stage?
Okay, so virtually everybody will talk about the honeymoon period. You know, when you first arrive, it's like, wow, we've done the right thing. The weather's fantastic. This food's amazing. People are so kind. And then after a little while, it's like, oh, but I can't sort a bank account out, and I really can't get a doctor's appointment. And oh, this is what happens. We get disillusioned. Okay, so then we come down into the dip, and we call that, unfortunately, the ditch of despair. Okay, because we look back to what we had, and we think, oh, I can't believe I've left it all behind. And we look forward to what we want, and we think, how are we going to get that? And we kind of get stuck there for a bit. Yeah. So one of the things I encourage people to have a look at or to consider is Maslow's triangle of needs, so pyramid of needs. And I don't know whether it's worth saying a little bit about that.
Sure, go for it.
Yeah.
It's important, yeah.
Okay, so in this pyramid, there's 5 layers. There's kind of basic physiological needs, so food, water, safety. Then we come up, we increase the safety needs, we have somewhere to live, we feel secure, we've got our health, we've got some resources. We come up again, we have love and belonging, community. Come up again, we've got self-esteem, kind of recognition, that type of thing. And then right at the top, we've got what we call self-actualization, which is basically us living the best life that we could. And we've all got our own versions of that. Okay, so typically, most people will be at where they used to be. They'll be right at the top of that pyramid, and they'll be used to having their friends, their family, their community, recognition from their work. People know them, they respect them. So we feel good. And then we move, and actually what we do, we at least strip away those first 3 layers, the top really good 3 layers. So we come and we need to secure, where do we buy our food? Is a house secure? And we can feel quite cautious to begin with because we don't really know how it works. So we've really tumbled down this pyramid. And for a lot of people, if they've spent most of their life at the top of that pyramid, it's really disconcerting. And I said to you, people come and say, I'm meant to be living my dream and I feel awful. It's because of all of these things at the top are missing. So understanding that they kind of go whilst we re-establish ourselves, and they come back as we come back up out of the U-shape. So gradually we make community, gradually we make more friends. People start to go, hey, that's Dylan, he does that job and he's a great guy, and we can trust him. Your self-respect comes back, and then you can go back to thinking, actually, I'm living the best I could, and actually I'm doing it here where I wanted to be.
Yeah. I mean, I guess with Maslow's hierarchy of needs, there's the one side of things, which is there's obviously maybe not obviously, but within your hierarchy of needs, there are certain things that maybe aren't being met, which is why you make that move in the first place.
Yeah.
For me, straight away, I think safety, because that was probably one of my top 3 reasons for leaving South Africa and coming here was safety. But I think that's the part that people kind of forget about is that there's a rebuilding phase. You in one plane ride, you remove all of those parts of the hierarchy, the hierarchy of needs, those things that made you that contributed to your image and your self-esteem and your happiness, and it's gone. When you land in the next place and you're rebuilding. And we forget how long it took us to build that in our home country, never mind in a new country with a different language, with a different culture, with some different aspects. And that's the challenge. So a lot of this has got to be about awareness. It's got to be about, I know what I have to do. I know what I'm giving up and what I have to rebuild. Absolutely.
And then you find people who have already done a country move do it more quickly because they know this, they've lived through it. Yeah.
Now, one of the things that when you're talking about the transition through the dip, and all of those things that come along, and you've got what was the ditch of despair.
Yes.
It's brutal.
Yep.
What about when that's with more than one person? When we're talking about couples, when we're talking about kids, we all go on our own different. My wife loves to talk about how everyone's got their own rhythm, and that sometimes I expect people to go at things at my rhythm, and she's like, look, it doesn't work like that. Not everyone's going to go at the same speed. Not everyone's going to go in the same rhythm. Not everyone's going to transition through things the same way you would. How does that's a massive factor as well when we're moving?
Huge. So so I work with couples a lot, and often that's one of the things that's happened is one of the couple has gone through to the other side much more quickly, and they're impatient for their partner to catch up with them and experience what they're experiencing. And obviously the one is left behind can be quite resentful sometimes, especially if they didn't really want to come. Yeah. So it can make for some very difficult dynamics in the couple, and quite a lot of arguments. So actually, again, it comes back to awareness, understanding, like your wife does, that people are in different places and they take their own time is essential here, and kind of reaching back to the other one sometimes as well. Yeah.
Yeah, that's huge. Alison, you spoke about the hierarchy of needs, and we've touched on it, and especially when you're sort of in the bottom of that curve, because of a lack of those things that you've built up before. In your life, I think for me, the thing that I struggled with probably the most. I'm quite like I'm a pretty stubborn person, and that can be a good thing in difficult times. It's a bad thing in other situations, but it can be a really good thing when you've just got to grind it out. It helps to be stubborn. But I think one of the things that I missed were those little things that you take for granted that weren't little things; they were big things. Being able to call up a friend and say, "Hey, I'm around the corner. Let's go grab a drink." Hey, I'm around the corner, put on the kettle, I'm coming for some tea. Those little sort of little creature comforts, little routines, little things that you took for granted that I took for granted living back at home, that all of a sudden weren't there anymore. Those all form part of this, and those are all form part of that sort of ditch of despair where you're wondering, have I made the right decision, and when am I going to start to feel better about this?
Absolutely. And of course we can do this, we can Zoom with our friends across the world, but it's not the same as that casual bumping into somebody, that delight, or that, like you say, popping around for a cup of tea, where it's not planned. They're really essential things for us.
When you mentioned it takes a year for the transition to go from the honeymoon phase, the ditch of despair, and then everything starts to look a little bit better.
Yeah.
What are some of those things that start changing in this transition from that ditch of despair to now? Okay, now I'm starting to feel a little bit better about this. Things are starting to become a bit easier. What are some of the steps that happen for us to start going up towards the more positive side of things?
Okay, so a lot of these things are really practical, and so we can actually, psychologists will assess how likely a person is to go through that transition more quickly, and we can hijack some of those things and do them for ourselves. Okay, so one of the key things is connection, and we've been spending a lot of time talking about that. So making an active plan to connect locally is going to help you go through this transition more quickly. So often we try to do too much too soon. So just in a small stepwise thing. So it might be, okay, look, this week 1, I work out where I've put my groceries and I've unpacked things that make me feel at home. Really essential tasks early on. When people don't do these things, they tend to always be more miserable and take longer to get through to the other side. Okay. Week 2, I'm just going to investigate the coffee shop in my village. Yeah. Week 3, I'm going to actually say hello to somebody in the coffee shop. You know, it seems very, very simplistic, but it's just that gradual. I set myself a small goal to connect, and I do it. And of course, we get that kind of, well, we get a dopamine high when we've completed a goal, right? So we feel good, and we just keep stepwise completing these little goals to increase connection. That's a really vital thing to speed through this. Yeah.
Okay. I mean, I think, you know, I want to chat just about some of those other principles that you and I previously spoke about, which help, you know, when we talk about introversion, extroversion, locus of control, those kind of things.
Yeah.
But one of the things I just want to touch on, because the connection side of things is so important, I do feel like I'm fortunate in Portugal that it's a place that is relatively easy to connect with people. There is a caring culture. There is a culture of socializing, and it's not you know, although you do have cliques and families and people that have been sort of in the same circle, they're not completely averse to welcoming a new person into their circle and to making you feel part of something. And that was huge for me, that I had people around me almost immediately through work, through people that I just bumped into by accident, who were like, "You're one of us now." And that's something very Portuguese. And I think that there's an advantage to being in Portugal when it comes to connections. Did you find the same thing?
Absolutely. Yeah, they're curious about us too. Yeah. So I think they encounter our strange ways, and they're mostly curious about how come. They probably don't adopt them at all, but it's like, why do you do that then? Yeah. Yeah, I definitely found that. And even in our village, where most of the older Portuguese can't speak any English, and obviously at the beginning our Portuguese was truly terrible, the attempt to connect, often through gifts, you know, people give you things, don't they? I was given eggs, or they've got more lemons than they can use, so they give you lemons, and so that exchange, even if it isn't actually talking and understanding, it's still that generosity, I think, that's there. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it comes back down to those little things that aren't little things. You know, I remember being on my own when, you know, I hadn't met my wife yet, and I'd get to my apartment late after work or something, and there'd always be a Tupperware of food from the neighbor, you know, because I think she was just worried that I wasn't eating. And I mean, she just needed to take one look at my gut, and she would have known that I was eating. But you know, there's just this warmth that I experienced in the Portuguese culture, where it was, you know, I might not really understand you. I might think that you're a bit weird with some of the things that you do, but you're here now, and welcome, and you need to eat. You know, I need to take care of you. And that was a really beautiful, beautiful thing. Those little things of, you know, like you mentioned the story about your friend saying, "Hey, we're just going to shoot out." And then it ends up being a whole day event. And you first actually start getting annoyed about it. You're like, "Okay, you know, you told me that this was only going to be half an hour." And then eventually you think, "But wait a minute, this person's now invited me into their life and has spent their whole day with me. Wow, I'm quite fortunate to be in this position." And that's where you start to really be grateful for the place that you're in.
Yeah, and you give yourself to it, don't you? Just like, okay, let's go with it.
But that's key. The giving yourself to it is huge. I mean, you speak about the locus of control. I suppose that's where this comes into it, is giving yourself to it. Going with the flow is another way to say it, maybe. But maybe, I mean, maybe you can speak a little bit more about the framework behind that part of, okay, this is where I am. This is what I've got to give myself to and be open to, and otherwise it's not going to work out. Can you comment on that?
Sure. So I think it's a little different with the locus of control. So I think what you're talking about is being open to the experience and kind of parking some of our unhelpful beliefs about how things should be. Yeah. So kind of big part of Anglo-Saxon culture would be sticking to schedules. Yeah, you said it was half an hour. It's 40 minutes, you know, this is going crazily out of control. So I think it's harder for us Anglo-Saxons to just go, okay, let's see what happens. The Portuguese are great at that. Yeah, so being open, being curious, I think is what you're talking about. Locus of control is slightly different, but it's very important. So when we talk about locus of control, we tend to either, as individuals, have an internal locus or an external. So if I have an internal locus, then I think actually I can make a difference in my life. I can decide what I want to do. I can work towards it and make it happen. Okay, so although I know things are going to happen beyond my control, broadly, I shape it. Okay. If I've got an external locus of control, then I'm more likely to believe in fate or karma or some external force that shapes my destiny. And so I might have a tendency of going, okay, this is just the way it's got to be, and I give into it. And it's more a give into it rather than I go with it. So I give into, this is my fate. So it might be as an expat, I might arrive and I just think, well, I can't make any friends. That's the way it's supposed to be. I just need to be by myself. And that's how it is. Yeah. Whereas if I had an internal locus of control, I would be thinking, okay, well, making friends seems to be a bit harder than I thought. What can I do to change that? What's my first step? I believe I can make a change, and I do it. Okay. So we tend to find that people who've got an internal locus of control do better as they transition into another country because they take action.
Yeah. Okay. So they accept this is the new reality, but I'm not a victim. I can do something about it. I can find a way to adapt and to find my place in all of this.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Alison, just maybe some things about Portugal that might be helpful for people. We've got listeners from all over the world who are considering moving to Portugal. What are some of those things that people should be aware of here in Portugal in terms of culture, history, that are helpful and that were helpful to you with navigating and moving here?
Okay, so can we separate culture and history? Is that okay?
With pleasure. Yeah. You're the boss.
Where do you want to go first?
Let's go history. Let's start at the beginning. What are some of the history? I think you mentioned to me the first time historical pointers that we should be aware of that could help us with understanding the Portuguese culture or Portuguese-nesses.
Okay, so I think one of the most important things is it's such an old country. You know, its country borders haven't changed for hundreds of years, which is really unusual in Europe. Yeah. It's very much an individual country, so Portuguese hate being lumped together with the Spanish, you know. And I think sometimes if we're not from Europe, it's very easy to just kind of do that. Yeah. I think the significant things would be the age of discoveries, you know, how amazing the Portuguese were in terms of navigation. They really led the world and were so proud of their endeavors in that respect. And the whole finding Brazil, of course, there's lots of difficulties now in how we describe the age of discoveries in terms of what's appropriate these days. Yeah, but they're proud of it. The earthquake and the tsunami, the way, they just really kind of established a real important capital in Europe from the riches they had from the age of discovery. And then that was wiped out with the earthquake and the tsunami and the fires. Really important part of Portuguese history to understand. And then I guess more recently, the whole Salazar regime and then the Carnation Revolution, you know. And I think this probably says so much about the Portuguese. I think only a couple of people were killed. And then you have all these images of people putting carnations in the barrels of the soldiers' guns. You know, it's such a peaceful revolution, which kind of encapsulates the Portuguese.
Yeah, there's two things there which There's one thing that I find amazing about the Portuguese culture, that they are very aware of we've got to talk in generalizations here, of course,
Yeah.
but the Portuguese mentality seems to be very aware of the things that we can control and the things that we can't control. There's a stoicism about them that they are like, well, there's some things that are in our hands and there's other things that are not, and we have to just accept the things that are not in our hands. And I wonder if those big historical events, those natural disasters, earthquake, tsunami, fires, were part of that. Okay, we had all this stuff and it got taken away from us, and there was nothing that we could do about it. We just have to rebuild and live our lives. Because, I mean, Portugal, since then, is not a wealthy country at all.
No.
But wasn't really their fault that happened. And then there's the side of things where, okay, what can we do to get ourselves out of this position? And what is the best way that we can do that without hurting anybody? And there's another big window into the Portuguese mentality and the Portuguese mindset as well.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely bang on there, Dylan, because we learn so much from their history, and these traits come through. Because, of course, history is still alive in us. We tell our children the stories, they tell their children the stories. It keeps going. Yeah. And so that's where some of the cultural traits originate from. Absolutely.
Interesting. Yeah. Because, I mean, the revolution, the Carnation Revolution, that was recent. I mean, there's people alive, there's many people alive in Portugal who remember it. And that was an incredible part of, it's always an incredible revolution. You mentioned almost nobody died during that. That's quite an incredible thing.
Yeah, and it's very important to be sensitive as a foreigner around this, because, like you say, there's many people who live through that, and there are many difficult things happen. So you have to tread very carefully around this subject. Most Portuguese don't really want to talk about it.
Yeah. The one thing that I found interesting in Portugal's history is how Portugal was very much a global village early on, with lots of cultures, lots of passerbyers, lots of people coming in and out. And that seems to have influenced how Portuguese people view the world. Even people stuck in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of a village somewhere where not a lot of people pass through, they will be conscious of the fact that you're not from Portugal, and they're curious of it and aware of it and mindful of it, and they accept you no matter where you are from, which is really, really an interesting part of Portuguese culture.
Absolutely. And you'll often find somebody in those villages who's lived somewhere else in the world. It might be the really old guy drinking his coffee, and it turns out he spent half of his life somewhere else. So often they're not just what they seem either. There's some real fascinating stories there too.
Yeah, interesting. What are some of the other in terms of culturally, or I don't know if maybe mindset is more of the right description, but what are some of the things that would that people should be aware of in terms of Portuguese culture when they come here?
Okay, so I think there's 3 really important things, that really help understand the Portuguese. And we'll hear people just talking about these as traits they don't understand. Okay, so the first one is Portugal is a collective culture. So what that means is they favour the group over the individual. And a lot of things we've been talking about is the importance of the group and keep making sure everybody's okay. Yeah, which is delightful.
Yeah.
Most Western Anglo-Saxon cultures are the opposite way around. So we favour the individual over the group. Okay, so you get a very distinct culture clash when you bring those two together. So often, as individuals, we've had the freedom to leave our culture, and we've sought Portugal because it's such a kind, loving place. And we're not really realising that one of the reasons that makes it so lovely is they favour the group. And then we arrive and we get frustrated because as an individual, we can't get the recognition or the way of being that we want. We have to kind of go, oh, what happens in this village then? Oh, okay. It's harder for us to fit in. Yeah. but that's what it drew us to it in
Yeah.
the first place.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
So
that would also affect. I mean, one of the things that you hear is how slow things take. It's got to do things move at a different pace because we're considering the larger group as opposed to a few individuals. So that must make a difference there.
absolutely. So I used to say people matter more than time in Portugal. Yeah. And actually that kind of brings us to the second thing that's very different. Okay. So Portuguese culture is polychronic, and Anglo-Saxon, Northern European culture is monochronic. Okay. And the basic difference there is the Portuguese like to do many things at the same time. Okay. And we don't, or I say we, you and I kind of similar cultural background.
Yeah.
I want to get a task done, move on to the next task. I can see all the tasks running ahead of me and a sequential process. Whereas if you go, I think the most crazy thing I've been to is a parents' meeting at the school. I'm sure you've been to some of these. Everybody's talking at once, and what would take, I don't know, an hour max in England takes 3.5 hours. And yeah, many things are happening. Is that kind of, would you say that's true? Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's one of the things that a lot of people will say they find hard because they'll say, actually, this took so long. I can't believe it took so long. No, because they have this different way of seeing time. Yeah. And we can't change that. So we have to be conscious of it and go, okay, this has many advantages. And I, as the outsider, need to adapt to this.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's funny because the time aspect and the people aspect are so closely linked, and you see it in meetings. A meeting will take much longer. And it'll happen over a lunch, or it'll happen over a coffee, or it'll happen over a conversation about football. And then we're going to throw in a bit of work into this discussion as well, because almost the mentality is, well, no, I'm not just going to use the time just to tell you what I need to tell you. I also want to know how your family is, and I also want to have a conversation and have a chat. And so that concept of our usage of time is poly, but also because I value the person that I'm using
absolutely.
this time with. It's not just about that. So they're very, very closely linked. Now that you mentioned it that way, it's more than what we realize sometimes.
Yeah. And as soon as you understand that, it just makes you more accepting and takes away some of the frustration, I think. Yeah.
Sure. And what's the other?
The other one is, is the difference between traditional cultures and innovative cultures. Okay. So Portugal, not surprisingly, is a traditional culture. And when we talk about that, we talk about the risk of uncertainty. So the Portuguese do not like uncertainty. They want to have more surety. And then I think if you go back to the history, like all the different things that happened that were beyond their control, you can kind of see where that comes from. Yeah. So they like to understand what's going to happen and have rules about how things work. Okay. Now, we also know that there's rules and rules in Portugal, where there's some rules that everybody does obey and some rules that we kind of wiggle around, and that's completely okay. Yeah. And you only really understand those nuances after some time. But broadly, they have rules, tradition. This is how we do it. Mm-hmm. Yeah. We will be safe if we do it this way, basically. Okay. And then again, a lot of Anglo-Saxon Western cultures are much more innovative than that. It's like, how do we do it different? How do we get an edge here? How do we push it forward? Could we do it this way? Because because of our histories, we've been more secure. We're not so risk avoidant. Terrible things haven't gone wrong, so we can experiment. Yeah, and actually, this is a real big difference between American culture and Portuguese culture. So, American culture is probably one of the most individualistic, innovative cultures in the world, and Portugal is certainly one of the most traditional. Not so much one of the strong collective cultures, but it's a big collective culture. So a lot of Americans really notice this difference between these two cultures in this way.
Yeah, it's interesting. I see Portugal as this. They're sometimes in a war with themselves, because there's that collective culture, but it's also a country that, in many ways, is also very innovative and very ingenuitive. And they talk about the zinnegeskaar, and we find a way, but it's never at the detriment of the group, and that's something that's quite interesting.
So it's interesting, isn't it, how these three cultural values all link together.
Yeah, hugely. Yeah.
And I think you raise a really good point. It is definitely changing. So in Lisbon, there's lots of innovation hubs for tech companies and stuff like that. So this newer generation of Portuguese, I think that's important as well. The difference in the generations in Portugal is quite striking now in terms of mindset. So it's definitely shifting. Yeah.
Interesting. Alison, I don't want to knock you down into a mini ditch of despair, but if you could be back in Portugal right now, what would be the first thing you want to do? Where do you want to go? What do you want to see?
I would absolutely go straight to the beach, and Foz is my favourite beach, right on the front. Yeah, and just smell the ocean, watch the ocean, listen to the ocean. That's when we came on holidays. That's where we'd go first. Yeah, absolutely, and maybe get some nice fresh fish cooked at the beach.
Yes.
Yeah.
There's some good fish restaurants there as well on the Foz side. Alison, what are 3 things that people can remember and take away from our conversation?
Okay, so I think my first thing is be curious, be open, be curious about the new culture that you're coming into. Yeah, it's a lovely mindset. It helps us not judge. So that's the first thing. This transition is a normal thing. There's nothing wrong with you. You're going to go through the transition. You're going to come out the other side. There are practical things about connection and taking action that are going to speed you through that. But it is going to take its time. And the last one would be you're going to do it in your own way. So being kind to the people around you and just going, hey, where are you on this at the moment? Or what do you need at the moment? Is going to make for a much more harmonious transition.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. How can people follow you online and get in touch with you?
Okay, so I don't have a big online presence. I think it's part of being a psychotherapist. We're kind of quieter. I have my website, which is alisoncollis.com. I am in the process of making some podcasts, haven't launched them yet, but the link would be from my website. So that's the best place to go.
Yeah. Wonderful. We'll put links in the show notes so that if people want to be in touch with you, they can do that. Alison, a question that we ask all of our guests: Portugal, the simple life. Why?
Right. It's about, I think for me, time. It seems to be more time, pace of life, slower, and the purity of the nature, just being by the coast. Yeah, and then the thing we keep coming back to is the Portuguese, just how lovely, kind, friendly they are. Yeah, so what more do you need, really?
Nothing, not much at all.
Not much.
Alison, thank you so much. I've loved this. I think this is incredibly helpful for people that are looking to move to Portugal, but to almost anywhere. I think a lot of the time the principles are the same. So thank you so much for your time. And for now, I'm going to let you call it.
That's a wrap.
So thank you once again to Alison, and thank you to all of you for listening. Please subscribe, share with your friends, give us a thumbs up, and please leave a comment or a review. We'd love to hear from you. And as we say in Portugal, abraço. Welcome to the simple life.